Hello, everybody. Welcome to another thrilling episode of Views on Vue. I am Steve Edwards, the host with the face for radio, as you can see if you're watching video, and the voice for being a mime, but I'm still your host. And today, before we get into our new addition to the show, I'd like to welcome as always, the studio audience. Thank you for being here, people. I know the tickets are expensive, but it's well worth it. So joining the podcast with me now, as I've been flying solo for a while, we have a previous guest who overcame huge obstacles in a long application and vetting process. And I mean, it's like, just crazy trying to get into an elite organization. Mr. Cody Bontecou. How you doing, Cody?
Hey, Steve. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Cody is coming to us from the very cool and freezing world known as Hawaii. So we will all feel sad for him.
Yep. It's tiring looking at this beautiful blue ocean.
Yeah,
but somebody's got to do it.
Somebody's got to do it. I appreciate you doing that for us all. So for those that haven't listened, it's been a couple years. I don't even remember when we had you on. Or about a year ago.
Yeah, exactly.
About a year ago. And so he was just so mesmerizing and enthralling that we said, we got to get Cody on. So anyway, for those that haven't heard you before, maybe seen any of your training videos or conference presentations, why don't you give us the 411 on Cody?
Oh, the 411. Sure. So I've been playing around with Vue for the last, I want to say 4.5, maybe even 5 years now. Primarily started in a Python world, but I just couldn't I struggled with beautiful websites, and Vue is kind of my gateway into making really nice web apps. Started with just like personal projects and passion projects, but now I work with Vue professionally. And I love it. But I tend to actually lean on Nuxt. That's my primary use of Vue. Is I tend to use the Nuxt framework, and I've been really enjoying Nuxt through the version 3. I think it's on like a 3.6 now. I haven't dug into the latest features, but I do look forward to it.
All right, so why Nuxt?
So Nuxt, again, my initial, I got into Vue. I was working with Python professionally, and Vue was more for personal projects, just like entrepreneurial ideas. And I fell in love with Nuxt for the SSO. Sorry, not SSO. SEO functionalities, and also at the time I was just graduating from college, and so I didn't really have much money. And so I love the static site generation and SSR, allowing me to host my sites on services like Netlify and now Vercel for next to nothing.
So how are you using Python? I mean, to my mind, Python's always been sort of back-end. Were you using it only for back-end and something else for front-end, or how are you using it?
Yeah, so prior to getting involved with Vue, I was working with the Django framework. And so Django is primarily a backend framework, but it does come with like a templating, I guess you could I'm not sure what the proper term is. It's not a framework, but Jinja, I think it's called Jinja 2, which allows you to kind of weave in for loops and data within your HTML files.
Oh, okay, I see. Yeah, I've actually worked, about 4 years ago, I was working on a sort of an e-commerce project that was using Django on the back end with Nuxt on the front end.
Nice.
Which was sort of interesting. So, and I think they use Nuxt on the front end because of some of the developer type tools that make things easier. Like the directory-based routing and some other things like that. And then you just had API calls to the Django backend. So yeah, I've had a little familiarity.
Yeah, definitely. That was actually my first case of I was able to eventually bring Nuxt into the projects I was working in. And that's the exact stack I was working with, was Django REST framework for the REST endpoints, and then just the Nuxt front end. It actually wasn't until recently that I started playing with Nuxt on the server side as well.
So so why Nuxt as compared to Vue for your front end if you had your Django just for server side?
It was for like static site generation
Okay.
primarily.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and the server side rendering,
Mm-hmm.
it allowed for very cheap hosting of the web app, at
Mm-hmm.
least through services like Netlify,
Right.
and to get those SEO benefits.
Yeah, I actually have a site, it's a little older site, still on Next2. I'll probably go update some things soon.
Yeah.
But it's using a Prismic backend, a headless, headless CMS with Nuxt on the front end, and then it's just a static generation. And then I host it basically for free on Netlify. Don't tell Netlify. But yeah, I host it there, and so it's static, and so it's crazy fast. And it's one of those sites that doesn't get a lot of content updates, so it's not something where they're always in there having to add things and stuff.
Right.
But yeah, so Nuxt with some sort of backend certainly is a really good use case.
Right, and that was honestly just like a personal pleasure of mine, was how cheaply I could host a website and have it like see how much functionality I can get into it, and just create huge builds of just massive websites that eventually ended up being static through Netlify.
Mm-hmm.
Or just relying on third-party APIs that I could just manage on the client side.
Right. Yeah, I don't know if this makes me a bad Vue host or disloyal, but I've been really partial for static stuff to Astro. Mm-hmm. If you played with Astro at all, which has some, I like it. It's straight JavaScript, but what's nice. Are you familiar with Astro? Have you ever seen it?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't played with it, but I've been following through Twitter and just blog posts for pretty much since it was announced, and I was always fascinated with that idea of kind of this middle ground where, from my understanding, you can bring in a Vue component and a React component or a Svelte component, and just kind of have them all play nicely with one another.
Right. Yeah, I've used it just for some static sites. It's just pretty much straight JavaScript, except for maybe your custom Vue component that you drop in. And it takes a little bit of getting used to, but once you get used to it, it's pretty easy to use. And they do have SSR capabilities now. Last I talked to Fred Schott, because I've talked to him once on here and once on JavaScript Jabber about it, and then I just sort of keep my eye on it. But yeah, it's a cool tool. It's like, there's all kinds of different ways to do that setup. Static site generator, server side rendering. There's Astro and Nuxt and Next and Svelte kit and Svelte, and so that's just sort of the one that I've liked.
Yeah, and that's something I've just learned over the many years of my career. No, I'm kidding. But is yeah, is like there's all this hype for Next, for example, and so I like kind of sat down. I was like, all right, I'm gonna learn Next. What is so great about Next? And it just I felt like I was constantly struggling to solve a problem that would have been very simple for me in Nuxt. And it just I've just realized that I don't know how much value there is kind of moving away from one server-side rendered framework to another. And I am actually working with Next professionally right now at my job.
Oh, really?
And so I'm getting a bit deeper. Excuse me. And it is nice, but it's ultimately just JavaScript and TypeScript. It's very similar, and once you understand the pattern of one framework, it's not too different than the design patterns of other frameworks. And so that's kind of why I do enjoy Nuxt. And after like playing around with different frameworks, I've just like, what, Nuxt is what I'm best at, and so I would rather really master Nuxt and find all these nice little like intricacies of the framework than have just a mediocre understanding of multiple frameworks.
Yeah, right. Better be not to be jack of all trades, master of none. Just sort of get good at one thing. Yeah, that's been my approach too. There's a lot of stuff out there that I could really learn, and I just my choice has just been, I'm not going to try to exhaust myself and try to learn, 5 different frameworks and 10 different tools, but rather sort of just get the tool sets that work for me. And, you know,
Right.
and the other side of that, though, is to be careful is, you don't want it to be the way I used to be with Drupal when I first started, is that everything, Drupal is a hammer and everything else is a nail, no matter what you use. Oh, yeah, this is what I got. This is what I got, so I'll use, for something server side, I like to stick where I'm comfortable with Laravel and PHP
Hmm.
from a coding standpoint, a backend standpoint, and then I can use Vue or Astro on the front end if need be. And uh,
Yeah.
trying to stick with Tailwind for the CSS for the very limited CSS skills that I've got that are always stretched anytime I have to do anything fancy. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's the issue. And Nuxt is, you can obviously do it for static. You can do it for uh, dynamic stuff. If you want to have a node server running and write some node code. And so now here's one thing with Nuxt, and I've never understood this. And I've talked to Drew. We've had Daniel Rowe on. Oh, by the way, tease, we're going to have Daniel Rowe on here again here in a couple of weeks to catch us up on the happenings in the Nuxt world. Is he's sort of the tallest hog in the trough in Nuxt, in the Nuxt organization these days. But going back to that, we always talk about the server side rendering and running on the server. And what still have never gotten my head around, and maybe you can explain this to me in a way that will get through my thick skull, is when I'm looking at my code, when I'm working in a Vue template or a Nuxt template, right? We talk about how the backend sends up the rendered code, right? And then in straight Vue, it's just you mount it, and then the template goes and gets all this stuff and loads it up. And there's a whole issue with it takes too long for the bot to get, so you got ACO issues. So that's why you send the server side rendered code, right, from the backend, so it's already there for the bot.
Hmm.
And there's ways around that if you're using a front end, straight Vue front end like RenderTron or other pre-rendering services. But if I'm looking in my code and I'm watching, using a debugger, whether it's the dev tools in the browser or something else, where do I see that rendered code that's being sent? Is there somewhere that you can see that as it's coming in before the Vue component is mounted and you do any front end hydration?
Oh man, you've stumped me. Excuse me, but yeah, that's. But I hear what you're saying. If you can see that server side rendered code, um, and yeah, frankly, I'm unsure. That's probably a better question for somebody like Daniel. Like I said, I've just recently actually started playing with the server side, like actually managing some of that server side rendering
Oh,
things.
okay. I thought you became instant expert when you started working with it. So I assume
Yeah,
you could
right.
answer all
Weird,
my
huh?
detailed questions.
No, but primarily my experience is on working on like the front end side of
Right.
Nuxt. Just having all this SSR magic occurring, and I could just utilize the benefits. And I think it does a good job at that, of abstracting away a lot of that complex things. And I say abstraction, but really it's just magic. I don't understand it
Mm-hmm.
fully. Um, it just kind of works, which is really nice for somebody with like an entrepreneurial goal. I just want to
Mm-hmm.
get this out. Um, but I'm sure it would be nice to have a better understanding of some of these things for debugging reasons. Um, but yeah, save that for Daniel. I'm sure he'll be able to tell you. He seems to know everything about
Oh yeah.
Nuxt.
Oh, he's way down in the bowels, the nitty
Yeah.
gritty. Drew is like that too. He's pretty, and he just uses it all the time on big stuff. So he's really pretty intimate with it. Well, so yeah, we'll pester
Yeah.
them. So what do you use for your CSS? Use just like vanilla CSS, your own CSS? Use something like a Tailwind or a Bootstrap or a Bulma or something? Or what's your
Sure.
tool of choice?
Funnily enough, I guess. Really, I guess you just reminded me. What got me into Vue was actually Vuetify. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not sure if
Okay,
you're
yeah, forgot
familiar.
about Beautify, of course.
So Vuetify is this wonderful material design based framework that just built out all of these beautiful Vue components that you can just plug and play. Just do like a V sidebar,
Mm-hmm.
drawer, or whatever, and all of a
Right.
sudden you have this wonderful animated Vue component. And so that's kind of initially what got me into Vue. But the limitations of something like Vuetify is it's very hard to customize, um, or at least was. I'm not sure where it is these days. And so as I started needing more customizable UI components, I did end up in using Tailwind, and now that's what I use personally and professionally. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, it's really interesting in looking over the Twitterverse or social media in general. Um, and you can see where, even on Hacker News, you'll see Tailwind stuff come up once in a while. And, you can understand, Adam's told the whole story about how it came to be, and why he created Tailwind and how it works that way. And to me, it makes perfect sense, what you're trying to do. But man, you get some people that are just anti Tailwind and they hate it. It's like, for some people, it's not enough just to say, "No, I don't like it. I don't use it." It's like, well, this is why Tailwind sucks because it can't do this and this.
Yeah.
And so it's real interesting. My first full-time Vue developer position, we used Vuetify. It was an app that was already built that I took over Vue 2 with Vuetify 2. So we use Vuetify, and you're right, it really does do a lot for you. You can just drop in a component and put it in, and you got to add your so it's classes, and it's using Flexbox and Grid for you, and you just got to put in the right classes. And it was a real similar thing. We've had John Leader on a couple times actually to talk about Vue. I think we had him on back in like November, December. We were talking about the state of version 3 of Vuetify, and at that point it still wasn't fully fleshed out, and I'm not sure where it is right now, to be honest. At my day-to-day now, we use Bootstrap Vue, just because that was what they chose to use at the time that they were first starting to build the app, and it's very similar. It just uses Bootstrap behind the scenes and has classes and does a lot of stuff for you. It's really great. But to your point about being able to tweak things, it's like one of those things that out of the box gets you 80% of the way there, but the last 20% you need to do on your own. But with some of those predefined libraries like that, you really can't. It makes it difficult. Takes a lot of work.
Yep.
And I think the idea with Tailwind is that you can do that. You can get like truly headless stuff, and then just put your own Tailwind classes on top of it. In my app, I just it's really a data heavy app that my Inertia Vue Laravel project I've been working on. It's member management type of thing, and so there's going to be a lot of data tables, and I really, really wanted to use Vuetify at the time, but it was like one of the last 4 things that hadn't been done, was still really in flux, was the data tables stuff. And so I was like, yeah, okay. So I ended up just going with straight Tailwind and building my own tables. And since then, I think they've come a long way. I've sort of checked in now and then. And what I did was I started out with Inertia has a demo app called oh my gosh, I can't remember. It starts with a P, that I just used that as my template and tweaked the hell out of it and added my own component. Ping, that's right, Ping CRM is what they call it. That's really sort of a little basic CRM, but I just took that and modified the snot out of it, and have gotten really good at building my own data tables. I mean, my own completely custom data tables in terms of layout, in terms of styling, in terms of filtering. That was the biggest thing for data tables for me, and my use has always been like filtering and sorting and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so fortunately, Laravel has a really slick tool called Laravel Query Builder. And what it does and you have to do your own coding and your Vue template in terms of passing the parameters, but once you pass your URL parameters to the query builder in your controller, it does it all for you. And then you can customize and create custom filters and stuff like that. So for someone like me who really likes to get close to the metal when I'm developing and know how things are working, instead of having just some black box that I say, here, give me this, and it gives me to me without knowing why, that just drives me nuts. This gives me a lot of control over something like that. But the other thing I've really been noticing is that from a Tailwind standpoint, there are a lot of libraries, Tailwind-based libraries like a Beautify, like a Bootstrap Vue, that have all these pre-built components that you just plug play. You can drop them in, the full list of all your form elements and buttons and, slide-ins and all that kind of stuff that you can, and then you just style them yourself with Tailwind. So a coworker of mine has been a real fan of Daisy UI, which is one example. And I've looked at them, and they're really, really pretty cool. Just doing stuff like that. I think Prime View is another one, set of components that you can use Tailwind with. In fact, there's a guy named Austin Gill. I don't know if you know who Austin is. He, for a brief while, when he was living in San Diego, he was one of our panelists here with myself and Lindsay. And since then, he's moved up here to Portland. He works for Akamai now. But the reason that I came across him in the first place was because of his headless components library. And I can't believe I'm Vuetensils, Vuetnsils, Vuetensils. And it was just a little project that he had going where here's your base components, your select list, your inputs, your whatever, and then you could apply the classes. And this is sort of before Tailwind and maybe early Tailwind, so it wasn't specific for Tailwind, but it gives you the whole quote unquote headless component is the way I've heard it addressed. And then you put your own styles on top of that. So that's sort of the benefit of the Tailwind side of things. Granted, you have to learn the Tailwind, classes and their names and stuff like that. But even Tailwind itself has its own set of tools. There's Headless UI. If you go to headlessui.com, they have it's a set of popovers and menus and text fields and stuff like that you can drop in and then style them as you want. And then there's also hero icons they have, which are SVG icons, JSX or SVG icons that you can either import as a component or just copy the SVG and copy that into your template too. So yeah, that's been my tool of choice for theming and designing and stuff like that. And,
oh yeah, one more to add to the list is was it Tailwind UI, right? Those
yeah, I bought that. I bought the lifetime membership. That it was I don't know, a few years ago, $150.
Yep.
And Tailwind UI is awesome. I've used that quite a lot, just because it's all their pre-built components, and they're always coming up with new templates. It seems like for different things. Fortunately, with their templates, the design way they're designed for, I wasn't able to find one that fit into my use case, for this data management type portal type thing. But he's got pages and pages of all the individual components. You need a list of some type, or a header, or a hero section, or he's got a whole section on e-commerce and all the different smaller components that you can just copy paste and drop in. And I've done that plenty of times, and then just change the styles as you want. So yeah, that's really awesome too.
Yeah, I enjoy it. And he, as the author of Headless UI, it kind of and hero icons, it kind of blends into these, so you get those drop down menus and popovers and things of that nature. So it works really well, and it accelerates, especially like a startup website. They have those pricing pages and all sorts of
all the e-commerce stuff, and some of this other cool stuff that's built in there I found useful is the typography and the forms thing. So the typography, the one place where I found that to be really useful is in the pro stuff is in the case where you have a headless CMS on your back end, and let's say you have like a text field, and so what you get from the back end is all the HTML, right? As compared to strictly the text. And so you can do your formatting on the back end, but then it's really, really hard if you want to customize some of the HTML, and the back end doesn't let you. Like I ran into that with Prismic, in just in terms of being able to format. But with this Tailwind typography plugin, just npm install Tailwind CSS typography, and then you just add your certain classes to the top of your thing, and it will handle all the, you can target specific elements and get really fine grained with, like an H1 inside a P maybe, or some of the steps you can target. And once I got my head around it, I was like, oh, that's how this works. This is cool. And yeah, you can do all kinds of different things. So yeah, some of that stuff, it's really awesome. But
yeah, that's really neat. I'm looking at that right now. I didn't even know that existed.
Yeah, you'll see. Going back to what I was saying, even with all that, you'll see all these posts on Hacker News or other places. Oh, well, Tailwind sucks because I can't do this and this. I'm like, man, find me the tool that does 100% of what you need out of the box, and you'll be a bazillionaire in no time.
Yeah.
Right?
Let them hate.
A path to your door. If you don't want to use it, don't use it. If you do, great. And so anyway, enough about me and my tools of choice. So another question. So what do you use? Get really detailed. Your tools like your laptop and your mouse and your keyboard and monitor and all that stuff.
Oh man. I wouldn't say I'm a super big hardware guy. Let's see. I'm on a M1 Max, MacBook Pro, computer sponsor or company sponsored.
Right.
Only 32 gigs of RAM. I had hoped for 64, but that's fine. And that's about it.
The M1s you don't need a lot though, man. You don't need near as much as.
Yeah, but maybe in like a year or two, all our VR rendering and LLMs, local LLMs, who knows, right?
Right.
And yeah, that's about it. I'm a trackpadder. I carry around an iPad if I need a second monitor. But all in all, I'm a very nomadic person, I guess. I travel quite a lot, primarily just for pleasure and surf. And so my actual work station is very small.
See, I'm I want as much real estate as possible for my screens. I mean, I'll have to show you a picture of my setup sometime, but I look like, control center.
Yeah.
Because I've got my own laptop that I use for my projects and, outside of work stuff. It's an older Intel based Mac. And then I just not too recently fairly recently got an M2 Mac for work because that's what they're distributing. And then I've got a 32-inch monitor and a couple of 27s. I used to have 4 monitors on my desk. I had this big old-time oak desk that a friend gave me years ago. It's probably 6 feet wide and 3 feet deep. And I actually used to fit 4 monitors on here where I had the whole, it would literally come out to my side to the edge of the desk, and then I'd have 2 back here, and it was and then 2 computers, and I've got 2 keyboards separate for each one, and I've gotten that down pretty good. But this last time I was like, nah, 4 was too many. So now I just have my laptops on either side, keyboards in front of me, and then front central I have my bigger screen, my 32-inch, and then my 27's off to the side. But then I have a KVM switch. So I got a KVM switch in the middle, so I can flip my middle monitor between the 2 computers depending on what I'm doing. So during the day I've got it on my work computer, and then other times I've switched over to the other one. So yeah, I was listening to somebody on a podcast the other day who's a well-known coder, and I don't remember who it is, but he's like, yeah, I'm one of those people that I've always just worked on my laptop and keyboard, and that's it. I'm like, I would get claustrophobic.
Yeah, I everyone has their. I guess a friend / mentor of mine once told me, because I would always have my IDE open with I might have multiple not tabs, but splitting the pane, so I can have multiple sections. And whereas I looked at him and he just had one function, and it was very zoomed in, so all he saw was maybe 5 or 6 lines of code. And that blew me away. And I was like, and his philosophy was, that's all you're thinking about. And so he really tries to just focus on those individual problems that he's working on. And that kind of stuck with me. Whenever I expand to multiple monitors, those monitors always end up just being distractions. Magically a YouTube video appears on one of them, or a Twitch stream or something. So I try to stay pretty minimal, but outside of my monitor and hardware setup, I do really enjoy my desk. So I do have a electronic up and down desk that allows me to stand when I need to, and I have a mini treadmill that I'll walk on, and I actually have a desk outdoors as well. So if I ever need to, I just pick up my laptop and walk outside and enjoy the view, enjoy the birds, maybe look at the surf.
No pun intended, right?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, enjoy the view while writing Vue. So that I guess that's more kind of what I shoot for, is just very mobile. If I want to work on my couch, I can. I'm not. I also love to just go to coffee shops too. That's a big thing for me. So just creating a workstation that allows that mobility is very important.
Yeah, see, I'm the opposite. I like the split pane thing, and I do it quite a bit, just because if I'm working on something, I'm referencing something that was done somewhere else. That way, I'm not tabbing back and forth or whatever your key is to go look at. I can just look at them side by side and
Right.
work on them. So
Right. This was a backend dev. I definitely still have multiple panes where
All right.
I might have my CSS file, or where I've been working in React lately, so I'll have a CSS, for whatever reason they have CSS files instead of single file components like
Right.
Vue. I'm spoiled. So I'll have a CSS file open and the actual template open, and then on the side I'll have like the actual web page that's being rendered. So I definitely am, I don't just look at one function at a time. But
Right. So what do you use for your IDE? Speaking of IDEs.
oh, I'm a VS Code fan. Yeah, Visual Studio Code, but I've recently heard of something called VS Codium, I believe is what it's called.
Yeah,
VS,
sounds somewhat
yeah,
familiar.
open source binaries of VS Code, and so it's basically VS Code without all of the Microsoft telemetry data. Basically, it's VS Code without the Microsoft, which I don't know. I've been thinking about more and more lately, just trying to disconnect the data streams where I can. I haven't quite picked that up, but it's on my radar. The only reason I haven't picked it up is it doesn't have all of the extensions that VS Code does, and so I just kind of have to gauge how much I rely on extensions.
Well, it was interesting enough that you mentioned that. I posted an article here, and it was about VS Code and how. Oh, here we go. Codium.com. Is that the tool? CODEIUM.
VSCodium.com.
Oh, there's a
Yes.
Codium.com.
Okay.
And anyway, they had an article called "Why Did Microsoft Build VS Code?" Turns out GitHub Copilot. And so the gist
Right.
is that they're forcing people to use their own chat or AI plugins instead of allowing open source ones to be used anymore.
Yep.
So yeah, that was sort of interesting.
Yeah, I just thought that was kind of interesting, and I don't know. I'm on the fence, but I'm starting to think a little bit more of local first solutions
Right.
to some of my problems.
Well, I'm a bad guy because I use PHP Storm, but have for a long time. That's our IDE of choice for work. But I'd been using it ever since Drupal days because they had specific Drupal integration. And I've tried. I've used VS Code. I've tried to use it, and it may be that I just haven't put enough time and configuration effort into it. But I know there's some functionalities, like in particular searching, and different ways and things you can search in that are much better in PHP Storm than VS Code, to my mind. And the built-in debugging is the Xdebug, which I live in with PHP, is very easy to get up and going. So yeah, there's just a number of things and some of it could be familiarity, as well. But it's got Tailwind compatibility and all that kind of stuff. So for me, it's been a real good IDE to use.
Yeah, I worked with JetBrains primarily in college. You get a free JetBrains license while you're a student, and
We're a
then
student.
yeah, and then after I graduated, that license expired, and post grad I was still very poor, and so I kind of, it was just one of those things, trimming the fat, trimming the expenses. So I picked up VS Code, and and actually fell in love with it. The extensions are all open source, and so there's a wonderful community of extensions that I actually found it to be much more extensible and customizable than JetBrain products. So I used whatever the Python one was.
PyCharm.
Yeah, PyCharm. Yep, exactly. And so that I enjoyed it, but I fell in love with VS Code, and it's really just keybinds in my eyes. Whichever one you can better understand the key binding and moving it around, that's what you're going to enjoy more. And so that was the hardest part, was relearning the keybinds that I enjoyed in PyCharm in VS Code.
Yeah, they tend to be across their offerings. They can be pretty similar. That's one of the things I really need to focus on. And I keep thinking, okay, I really need to focus on this, is learning the key bindings instead of using the mouse a lot.
Yep.
There's certain things I can do with the keys, but people that use like Vim, actually know that's everything is key bindings, right?
Yeah.
And with VS Code, with PHP Storm or WebStorm or your tool of choice, most of them are going to have custom key bindings that you can learn. And if you take the time, you don't have to use their default key map. You can do whatever you want. And if you take the time and get some set up and then learn them and memorize them, pretty soon you can just fly all over. And there's certain things I can do with the keys, but not near as much as I'd like to. But I just haven't taken the time to get a good set of key bindings that I'm familiar with and do them. So that's one of those.
Are you familiar with the Primogen?
I know the name. Yes.
He's a big.
He's the YouTube guy, right?
Yeah, YouTube, Twitter, kind of tech influence type guy from Netflix, and
I've heard him mentioned as a real good tech guy.
He's a big Vim influencer, and he'll live stream, and watching how he navigates through his code is incredible, and how he edits things, it's amazing, and it has made me attempt to learn Vim as well, and it's really difficult to learn because it's just so slow and painful at first,
right? And
so it's trying to set up a system where I can learn it while not impacting my day-to-day work too heavily is something I haven't figured out yet. But I can see how you spend a couple months or a year, and if you can eventually get to his level of code speed, your performance will go up drastically.
Oh, I'm sure. Now Vim is something you basically run in your terminal, right?
Well, you can, yeah, but there's extensions, even like VS Code extensions,
right?
So
but it's not like a separate Windows application that you would open on a Windows or a Mac desktop, right? You're running it in your terminal.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yes, exactly. But there's there's like iTerm, and there's custom terminals that you can run that. Again, with Vim, there's all sorts of open source extensions that allow you to really just build out exactly what you want, and visually and functionally. But also, like VS Code has a Vim extension, which just transforms all of your navigation to Vim commands. And,
I think PHP Storm has a like different key map options, default ones, and I think like BI or Vim is one of them. They have Mac and there's Windows, and I've seen other ones too. So so it makes it easy if you're coming from. They make it easier. So if you're coming from Vim, you can keep your key bindings, but then just have the additional.
Right. Exactly.
I'm just so used to my IDE and having all of my windows and buttons and all that kind of stuff. But I know Wes Boss, if you ever watch any of his classes, like on JavaScript, and he's mentioned this on his podcast as well, that people, a lot of times people are like, oh my gosh, how are you flying around the keyboard? That's just crazy how you're doing that. And some of the stuff he does in VS Code, where you type this and this, okay, this will give you 30 divs with this content in it with just a few keystrokes, those little shortcuts and things like that. It's like, damn.
Yeah.
But even, PHP Storm has, WebStorm has, templates, live templates, and all kinds of things you can customize the crud out of too, and just type a few letters, and this would give you a whole template, or this would, insert this code snippet for you or something like that. It's just, as with anything, it's just a matter of taking the time to sit down and learn them. And I know at some point I'm going to have to do that, and I'll probably be saying that 5 years later. So
yeah, that might be a good future podcast, just kind of talking about little like macros and templates and extensions to boost your performance.
Yeah, for sure. So, all right. So I know you got a meeting you said you got to go to, so we'll call this the Cody intro episode.
All right.
And like I said, we got Daniel Rowe coming up. For those listening, if you want to be on the show and you want a path to fame and fortune that happens to everybody that comes on this show, you can ding me at Wonder95 or at Views on Vue on Twitter. And yeah, we're always looking for more people with mad Vue skills to come on. So with that, we'll move to picks. Picks are the part of this show where we talk about really awesome things like my dad jokes or any number of other blog posts or food or TV show or whatever. I am going to make a pick for a t-shirt. As everybody knows by now, I'm quite the fan of dad jokes. And so there's this Venn datagram t-shirt at a place called dadinashirt.com. And it's really cool. If you know what a Venn diagram is, where you have multiple circles and then you can see where they all come together and have something common in the middle. And this one, it's got one circle of dad and one circle of jokes. And then where they come together, it's labeled where the magic happens. So it's really, definitely got to get one of those, put it on my Father's Day or Christmas or birthday list for my kids to get me.
Yeah, that sounds like you. That'd work out.
Right? And then, before we get to Cody, we'll do the dad jokes of the week.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Yes. So, oops, got to find my Slack here. So, one thing, I've done a lot of job interviews, over the years. And one time I went in and the interviewer told me, after looking at my resume, he says, "Your resume says you take things too literally." And I said, "When the heck did my resume learn to talk?" Right. So a turtle was crossing the road and it got assaulted by two snails. And when the police asked him what happened, the shaken turtle just said, "I don't know, it all happened so fast."
Oh, no.
Right. And then, I have kids. My kids are, two of them are grown and one's still younger. He's about 12. But, when my kids were really little, I spent a lot of time, money, and effort childproofing my home, with the plugs and all that kind of stuff. But the kids still got in. So those are the dad jokes of the week.
Thank you,
all right,
Steve.
Cody, what do you got for us for picks?
I guess my pick's a little technical. I don't know if you're familiar with, if you browse Hacker News often, but
every day.
There's this every day. Yeah, same. Who needs Reddit when you got Hacker News?
Right.
So there's this guy, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce his name, Shuawei, and he figured out how to stream Apple Vision OS's simulator onto a MetaQuest, which I thought was really neat.
The MetaQuest, is that like a VR headset?
Exactly. The MetaQuest 2 is Meta, Facebook's like consumer grade virtual reality headset. And so about 2 or 3 weeks ago, Apple released their Vision OS simulator, which is only on the Mac. And so you have to kind of, to get a head start, you start building your apps for the Vision OS locally on your Mac, but in a 2D screen. And so this guy was able to actually figure out a way to send that simulator wirelessly to your MetaQuest, so you can actually simulate the proper virtual reality environment within a physical device. But it's an Apple simulator within the MetaQuest headset, which is, I'm sure Zuckerberg's not too happy about that. But from what I've read, there's not really much they can do about it, because you're kind of doing like a remote desktop. There's some sort of remote desktop layer that allows this to happen. But I just thought that was really neat. If you're interested in the Vision OS, you can actually start properly developing apps for it. It'll be much nicer in a proper like virtual reality setting than on your two-dimensional on your screen.
Yeah, we've got one of our devs here, a guy that I hired about a year ago. He showed me, he's got a setup, and I can't remember what the setup is, but he can code in virtual reality.
Yep.
and you can have all kinds of desktops, and he showed it to me, showed a video one time. It just blew my mind. It's like, oh my gosh, to have all that, get all kinds of desks and monitors, and it's just crazy. He's also the same guy that, on his Mac, he uses multiple desktops. He'll have like 5 desktops that he's flipping back and forth, and it makes me dizzy just watching. I'm like, how do you do that? Just use a big screen. So he likes that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's crazy. Some of the, first time I'd ever seen coding inside of virtual reality.
Right, and so that's with the MetaQuest, and I've tried that, but the screen, the Pixel, the text is very hard to read on with their current screen technology. But supposedly, from what I've read, is this Apple product, the Apple Vision Pro, the screen is flawless. And it also has the M2 chip. And so it's going to be just as powerful as your laptop. And just from all the podcasts and articles I've read, they're pretty confident this is going to be a game-changing. So it's just something I've been interested in, trying to get prepared for. Because of that exact reason, right? Imagine if you don't need any of these screens or devices. It's just you put your headphones on and you're working, and then you take them off and you're back. And it can be this kind of, supposedly it's very impactful. And a lot of the Apple developers that have worked on it claim it's completely changed their work environment.
Yeah, I'd like to see a video or something like that. That'd be cool.
It's all under NDA at this point, so just the content creators saying how amazing it is. But every once in a while, you can find some tidbits out there,
and I'm sure they're not exaggerating at all.
Well, that's the interesting thing is everybody I've heard I have yet to hear one person who's put it on that didn't think it was going to change the world. And to me, that's kind of interesting. Normally, there might be some people love it, some people hate it, some people whatever, but every single podcast and article I've read and YouTube, it's just been this thing is amazing. So we'll just have to wait and see, but right. I'm excited.
Cool. Yeah, we'll put a link to that, whatever link you provide us, in the show notes so you can check it out for yourself. Alrighty, so with that, we will wrap this episode up. Thanks for coming on, Cody. We're looking forward to having you on the old podcast so people don't have to just listen to me. So
yeah, it's great to be here every Wednesday.
All right, I will live vicariously through you in Hawaii. So with that, we'll wrap it up. Oh, before I forget, first of all, thank you to the audience for showing up again. And if people want to get a hold of you, Cody, or follow you or give you money, where's the best ways or places to do that?
Oh, let's see. I have a website, just codybontecou.com. And I also have a Twitter at Cody Bontecou, just my first and last name.
And so Bontecou is Bontecou, not just you.
Exactly.
I found that out this morning. I forgot about that. So.
Exactly.
Alrighty. So with that, we'll wrap it up. Thanks, everybody. And we'll talk to you next time on Views on Vue.